Today we're diving into a powerful story about leadership, about grief, and about a decision that gets made when the stakes are incredibly high. It's one of those moments that truly defines a person, and it all boils down to a single question, one that every leader has to face sooner or later.
Seriously, just think about it. The one person who's been hunting you, the one person standing between you and everything you've ever wanted, is suddenly gone. The path to power is wide open. So what do? Do you celebrate? Do you grab that opportunity with both hands? Well, this was the exact situation a man named David found himself in, and his choice tells you everything you need to know about his character.
All right, so let's set the scene. Israel's very first king, a man named Saul, has just been killed in a huge battle with the Philistines. And not just him, his son and heir, Jonathan, has also been killed. After 40 years on the throne, the king is dead. Suddenly, the whole nation is leaderless, and everybody is holding their breath.
Now, at the same time, David, the famous giant slayer and Saul's #1 rival, is living in exile. For years, Saul has been obsessed with trying to kill him, and now Saul's gone. So everyone, and I mean everyone, is watching David. His friends, his enemies, the entire nation is just waiting to see what he does next. The throne is right there, totally within his grasp.
Okay, and this is where the story really gets interesting. A messenger, running straight from the battlefield, finally finds David after a 3-day journey. But here's the thing, he's not just delivering news. Oh no, this guy has a plan. He's got a whole story cooked up, and he thinks it's going to be his ticket to fame and fortune.
So he shows up looking the part, right? His clothes are torn, he's got dirt on his head. He's playing the role of a distraught survivor. He bows down to David, says he barely escaped the battle, but he's also carrying a little something that doesn't quite fit his story of defeat. He's got a trophy. He thinks he has the perfect picture.
David asks him what happened, and the messenger just launches into this incredibly dramatic story. He says, "You won't believe it. I just happened to be on the mountain, and there was King Saul, wounded, cornered by his enemies, barely able to stand."
And this is the key part of his story. He makes himself the hero. He claims that the king himself, the great King Saul, looked at him and begged for a mercy kill. He's not just a witness anymore. In his telling, he's the central figure in the king's final desperate moments.
And then he delivers what he thinks is the killer final line. He says, "So I did it. I killed him, just like he asked." And for the grand finale, he pulls out the proof, Saul's royal crown and his bracelet. He hands them over to David, the man he's sure is the next king, and just waits for the applause and the reward.
You can just imagine what's going through his head. I brought you the crown of your dead enemy. Now, where's my reward? He's probably picturing a promotion, a giant bag of gold, a parade in his honor. He had absolutely fundamentally miscalculated.
And here it is. This is the moment that turns the whole story on its head. Instead of a fist pump, instead of a victory cheer, David's reaction is the absolute opposite of what anyone, especially that messenger, was expecting. It wasn't triumph, it was pure devastation.
I mean, his reaction is instant. He rips his own clothes, a huge public sign of grief. He starts weeping, and he leads all his men in mourning. And get this, they're not just mourning for Jonathan, who is David's best friend. They're mourning for Saul, the man who tried to kill him. They even fast until evening as a sign of their sorrow.
Which of course brings us to the big question. Why? Why would you grieve for your greatest enemy? This wasn't just some political opponent. Saul had actively tried to murder David again and again. So is this just an act? Some kind of smart political move? Or is there something much, much deeper going on here?
Well, to really get David's reaction, first we have to understand the messenger's epic mistake. See, his whole plan, his whole story was built on a lie. And he just delivered that lie to the one person who lived by a completely different set of rules.
So here's what really went down. According to the earlier account, Saul was critically wounded, and he did ask someone to kill him, but it was his own loyal armor-bearer who refused. So to avoid being captured alive, Saul took his own life. This messenger, he was likely just a scavenger on the battlefield who stumbled across the body, saw an opportunity, snatched the crown, and made up a whole story to make himself look like a hero to David.
And this right here, this lays out the conflict perfectly. You've got two completely opposite worldviews colliding. For the messenger, the king's death is a golden opportunity. The crown is a prize. It's all about what's in it for him. But for David, the king's death is a national tragedy. The crown isn't a prize. It's a sacred responsibility.
For him, this moment is about justice and order, not personal gain.
So David turns to this guy, and the question he asks says everything. He doesn't say, "Are you sure he's dead?" or "Tell me more." He asks, "Why were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" For David, this wasn't about a rival dying. This was about the assassination of a king who he believed was chosen by God.
And so based on the man's own words, his own boastful confession, David orders his execution. The messenger is literally condemned by his own lie. He doesn't die for killing David's enemy. He dies because he proudly claimed that he had the nerve to assassinate the king of Israel. He became a victim of his own ambition.
So what's the big takeaway here? This whole thing was a massive test of David's integrity. And it shows us that real leadership isn't about how you get power, it's about what you refuse to do to get it.
You know, this wasn't some random, one-time thing for David. If you look at this history, it was a pattern. He'd had chances to kill Saul in secret before and always refused, saying it was wrong to attack the office of the king. He once felt guilty just for cutting off a corner of Saul's robe. So his grief and his judgment here, they're perfectly consistent with his core principles. He always chose order over opportunity.
And really, it all comes down to a choice between two paths. You have the path of the opportunist, which is all about using a situation, even a tragedy, for your own gain. The ends justify the means. And then you have the path of the leader, which is about sticking to your principles, respecting something bigger than yourself, and doing your duty, even when it's hard.
And that leaves us with a question that's just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. When you find yourself in a moment where your ambition and your principles are pulling you in opposite directions, which one wins? Which path do you take?